It's the final round of the Sharjah Masters 2025. We have Grandmaster Anish Giri jointly leading the tournament along with Nodirbek Abdusattorov. His opponent today is the talented youngster Aditya Mittal. And Anish must try for a win with white pieces, because if Nodirbek wins, he needs to win it in order to keep his title chances alive. E3 played, pawn to d5, pushed here by Aditya. And what is Anish going to do? He plays bishop e2, and this is Anish's way of telling his opponent that, hey, I just want to play a relatively non-theoretical game where I'll have my chances. Pawn to c5, and he pushes his pawn to d4. Anish has played a great event until now, but a very quick draw in the previous round against Velimir Ivic has let his opponent, his one of the other players in the tournament, Nodirbek, catch up with him. For now, he's taken the pawn on c5 and pawn to e6 by Aditya. He wants to take the pawn on c5 with his bishop. Anish now plays his pawn to a3. He wants to play b4 here. It's as if Anish is playing the queen's gambit accepted with the white pieces. Pawn to a5, so that when he takes here, b4 is not possible. He pushes his pawn to c4. And now he takes here on c5. And now white can simply castle. Knight to c3 played, putting pressure on the pawn. And Aditya decides to short castle. Anish can actually now go into pawn takes pawn, kind of an isolated queen pawn position. But he also decides to short castle. You can see that Anish's time usage has been very effective. 1 hour 32 minutes for him, 1 hour 19 minutes for Aditya. Pawn takes pawn taken here, and now bishop takes c4. Looks logical. Black can trade queens, but in such positions, white does have a nagging edge because of this square weakness. He pushes his pawn to h6. Maybe just a useful waiting move. Can we go with pawn to e4 here? That's a question, but then it does weaken the dark squares a bit. He goes b3 here, Anish. He wants to put his bishop on b2. Pawn to e5 played here by black. And he opens up the bishop here. Queen comes out to c2 for Anish. And I like white's position actually. Anish has somehow managed to get that very small little edge here. Queen to e7. He'll put his bishop here on b2 and just continue playing. This game does remind me a little bit of this very famous Kasparov versus Karpov game, where Kasparov was in a must-win in the last game of the World Championship match, and he chooses the most sedate opening out there because he just wants to keep the game going. And I think that's the same strategy with which Anish is playing here. Knight to d2. He's here for a long fight. He'll play for hours and then he'll see what happens. Bishop e6 played here by Aditya. Of course, Aditya Mittal is like 2547 is much lower rating than what his true strength is. He's like above 2600 strength often. He plays at that. I think he's also reached 2600 before. h3 played here by Anish. And now 1 hour 3 minutes for Anish, 56 minutes for Aditya Mittal. He goes rook c8 and lining up the rook opposite the white queen. Rook fd1 played by Anish, and notice how this move h3 is helpful so that there is no bishop g4 hitting the rook. Bishop comes back to d6. A slightly curious move here by Aditya, and Anish now takes on e6. And of course, you want to take back with the queen. Taking with the pawn would be a positional disaster, giving up the e4 square. So queen takes e6 and then knight to c4 now. Yes, that's what Anish does. He attacks the bishop here. He's also planning to enter the b6 square. The bishop drops back to e7. And now Anish plays his knight to b6. So with the knight attacking the rook, also maybe putting the knight on b6 allows it to then swivel onto d5 later on. Rook takes rook by Aditya. Both players maintaining kind of equal time on the clock. 45 minutes for Anish, 42 minutes for Aditya. Here, rook takes d1. And now knight b4. Whoa, that's a tactical shot here because now the queen attacks the knight. Takes on b4. Queen takes b6. And this trade actually helps black because now this is under pressure. Anish plays the queen to f5, attacking the rook. Very interesting move. And also attacking the e5 pawn. And Aditya very calmly plays his rook to e8. Because if you now take queen takes e5, I can go bishop b4 attacking your queen. So he plays his knight to d5. The queen is attacked. The knight is put under pressure. The bishop is attacked. You have to take that knight. So knight takes knight. And rook takes knight by Anish. And now he's attacking the pawn on e5. Bishop takes b4 played. And Anish now thinking about whether he should take on e5 with his bishop or not. And he takes it. Bishop takes e5. Small imbalance in the position. White has an extra pawn here. Black has an extra pawn on the queen side. Whom does it benefit? Well, very difficult to say as of now. Rook moves into d7, 7th rank, attacking f7, attacking the b7 pawn, and rook e7 is kind of forced. He goes queen e6. Well, the queen is attacked, the rook is attacked, the bishop is attacked. You have to take. And Anish has built a small lead on the clock. He has 25 minutes. Aditya has 19. You can't win this pawn. The bishop is hanging. So he plays his bishop to d4. I wonder what would be Anish's mindset as of now. Because, oh, by the way, rook c8. What's happening? If I take here, he wants to maybe go check, king h2, and play rook b1 and win this pawn. And look at this, g4 played here by Anish, making a square for his king on g2. Gives a check. King g2. And if b5 now, then maybe just rook b7. He plays rook to b1, attacking the pawn, and Anish captures the pawn on b7. Well, if truth be told, I feel like black has some chances here to play because of the outside passer. But in fact, white's active pieces ensure that this pawn is never moving ahead. Aditya protects the pawn. And now Anish has a perfect structure to start putting pressure. h4, h5 could be the first plan. And there he plays his pawn to h4. He has 19 minutes on the clock. Aditya has 15 minutes here. h4. And you can see Anish showing great sort of skills there. He's not looking tensed. He's moving around. He's looking calm. By the way, bishop e1 could be an idea here. So king goes to f1. And he's slowly trying to bring his king up on this side. So rook c2 played here by Aditya. And Anish, will he push h5 here? No, he goes g5. Aditya takes. Down to 5 minutes for Aditya. Anish 17 minutes. These little things do add up. the pressure now. G, maybe he will later on push his pawn to f4, f5. Maybe g6 is an idea here. Takes, rook takes g7. So the problems for black rising actually. If you go g6, it's already checkmate here on the dark square. So not so sure how to continue here. He goes bishop c5, the most logical move, because he's trading the bishop, but in a way he has given up the pawn on c5. So Anish now takes the pawn. But truth be told, this position is still a draw. Bishop takes bishop, pawn takes, but now Anish has something to play for. He has an extra pawn here on d4. And it is a passed pawn. And look at Anish there. He's taken off his jacket. He knows that a tournament victory is quite close. The other player who was on the same score as him, Nodirbek Abdusattorov, has drawn his game already. Which means that now Anish, if he wins, he's already the champion of the tournament. Rook d3, attacking the pawn on d4. He places his rook behind the passer, ahead of the passer. Aditya goes king f8. Aditya's issues are that he has just 1 minute on the clock. Anish has 12. So with all of these problems, it feels like the position is difficult to play here for black. King f4. And now rook d1. What's the way in which Anish can make progress here? Because he can't move his rook away. He immediately loses the pawn. If he tries to bring his king closer, he would be hit by a barrage of checks. So he goes king f5. And he's kind of forcing Aditya to go g6, which Aditya plays. And now you come back king e4. Yes, he plays king e5 here. Well, of course, there's a check here. You don't have to be afraid of checks. That's the first rule of playing such endgames. Checks will come. King comes back to f4. And now rook d1 again. Hanging in there. Aditya is super close to a draw. He brings his king to e3, defending the pawn here. Maybe rook a5 and a check here. Rook check. King f2 played. And you go back rook d1. But now after king e2, you will have to give up the control of the d4 pawn. So that's a small victory, you can say. Rook a1 played by Aditya. And now rook b5. What do you play? Rook e5. He moves his rook to b5. Plays rook a3, cutting the king off. Black's defense has been accurate. He stayed at 1 minute 29 seconds. Anish has kept a lead on the clock. He's at 9 minutes now. Rook b4 defending the pawn. King comes up to e6. Now the black king is coming here also to d5. Oof. Looks dangerous. King e2 trying to push the rook away. Rook a3. Look at Aditya there moving at super fast speed there. Now rook b5. Maybe to cut the black king off. Anish does play it. Rook b5 on the board. White slowly trying to improve his coordination. Aditya goes back king e7 because he knows that the white king cannot come up. Check. And now king goes back to e8. Well, the question was if king e6 was good. I believe it was no problems there. But he goes back. Rook c7 played by Anish. Waiting here. And Aditya also waits. Should Anish push the d pawn now? Is the big question. But then rook b5 trying to attack here. f4 maybe is another plan. He goes king f2. Rook to d3 played. And rook comes back to c4. King e7 played. Maybe what he wants to do now is go with his king again up. So if you see, earlier the rook was on d5. Anish now feels that his rook is much better placed sideways. 11 minutes for Anish, 1 minute 51 seconds for Aditya. King g3 with the idea of king f4. King comes up to d6. And now king d5 could be a plan. Oh, he's going king f4. But what if I go king d5? Because if rook a4, I can take and this is a draw. Can Aditya go king d5? He could, but he plays rook d1. He plays the waiting game here. Maybe he was afraid that if king d5 there is rook c7, but check. King goes back and then f7 falls. You have to calculate, and therein lies that 1 minute 36 seconds for Aditya. It's a bit dangerous. Now he goes rook a4, king d5. Again, the best move here. King d5 played. And Anish with this beautiful check. If king d4, I believe he wants to go rook a7 and now pick up this pawn. And actually it's playable, but king e6. Aditya being very safe. I think also very professional there, keeping this pawn alive. Rook check. And now very important to come back king d5 here. And if rook f6, you have to play this position, giving up the f7 pawn. There are good chances to hold there. King e7 played here. That's a blunder actually. And now you can see Anish being super thrilled and happy. Because if you look at it, a check now, king d5, and I'm simply pushing away the black king. King d5, check, rook a7 check coming in. Things have gone south for Aditya here. He plays his last move with just 5 seconds on the clock. Well, you first cut the king off. Yes, rook a7, king f8. And now, huge progress made by Anish. Save this pawn, king e4. I believe that would be the right way to play. He's thinking here. Aditya Mittal waiting for Anish to make his move. Because king e4 followed by f4 could be an idea. Rook a3, I'm a bit worried that the black king comes up. And then you give a check. King d7. I don't really know how we will make a breakthrough there. So not so sure here. As Anish kind of starts thinking on this move. And now Anish takes the rook and brings it back to a3. And Aditya goes to g1, attacking the g pawn. f4 played by Anish here. And he goes rook f1. Well, one thing to be careful about is if you go king e5, check, don't go to f6, it's a checkmate. So we have to be careful there. And look at Anish, he's getting excited there. He's sitting on the chair like a little kid. This is the little kid Anish that we remember, you know, who would get on the chair. And that's the kind of excitement that Anish feels while playing chess. Whenever he's now, he's 30 years old, but still, whenever he plays, super excited. And of course, when you're winning such a big event, then you definitely feel it. Brings his king back to e4. Gives a check. And now Anish is super happy. He goes rook e3, because next move, I believe he would like to move his king away and then the black king is cut off. King e5 played. King e7, pawn to d5. Pushing the pawn forward. Rook d1 played. Now how do you intend to make progress? Because d6 you just lose the pawn. So f5 maybe. Goes rook e4. Rook d2. And he brings his rook back to e1. And the rook goes to d3. Rook a1 with the idea of giving a check. So rook e3 makes a lot of sense now, pushing the king back. And Aditya can wait with, he goes rook b3. It's time to give a check now. Rook a7. If you play king d6, you lose the pawn here. He does go king d6. So maybe if he went back, pawn could push forward to d6. So king d6. And Anish can take the pawn. He decides to go king c4, which is maybe even stronger. Rook e3. Takes the pawn on f7. Rook check. King d3 played here. He plays rook a4. f5. Pawn push forward. He takes it. Wow. Is now f6 winning? Well, actually, f takes g6 is totally winning here. Takes it with the idea of g7 and rook f8 and queen. Pushes, gives a check. King comes here. If you go rook g3, I have g7, rook takes g5, just rook f5 check and make a queen. So king e6 pushed, and now Anish finds rook f8, because now g7 g8 is just winning, so you have to play rook a7 to stop this. He plays rook a7, but I think now the straightforward win is go with your king in and win the game. King f3. If you go king e7, there's g7. You could go rook g7. That's possible. But I think you are also okay with just giving up this pawn, right? King g4, rook g6, king h5, and white wins. But instead he goes rook f6, which is very clinical here by Anish. The main point is that he has two pawns. They are doubled, but the main advantage is that the black king is cut off. King g4, king h5. Rook g8. And king f5. Rook g7. And okay, if you by the way give this check, it would be a blunder because this is a draw. So you have to trade carefully. Rook ace d6 played with the idea of check, and king f8. So check now by Anish. King up, check. This is a draw again, so have to be careful. He goes rook a8, and Aditya resigns here as black has no moves for his pieces, And Anish Giri is the champion of the Sharjah Masters 2025. What a grind here by Anish. What a grind. And you can see from his face, he doesn't show his excitement yet, but to win this means a lot to him. He also moves to 2748 on the ELO scale, world number 12, slowly getting back into the groove, showing that class is permanent, form is temporary, and this is just epic. A big win for Anish. I think one of the uh, open tournaments that is the strongest in the world, and Anish played an open tournament after quite some time and managed to win it. So a great win there, and in the end he ground out that rook endgame against a very strong opponent.